The school grounds looked calm now, almost like nothing had ever happened. The sun warmed the brick buildings, and the trees swayed softly in the wind. It felt peaceful, almost too peaceful. For Ayanna and Zaria Blake, walking through Rosewood Hills Academy didn't feel heavy anymore. The stares, the whispers, the cold silence, they had faded. But the girls remembered everything. They didn't hold on to the past with pain. Instead, they carried it like armor, sharp and strong. Every step they took reminded them of who they were and what they had faced. The school had changed, not loudly, but in small, real ways. Teachers who once looked away now greeted them with respect. The air no longer felt thick. It was easier to breathe. As Ayanna and Zaria looked around, they saw more than buildings. They saw proof that strength, when shown at the right moment, could change everything. And they had done just that. Ayanna and Zaria hadn't just gone through a hard time, they had survived something that could have broken them. When the days were dark, and it felt like the world was against them, they didn't give up. They leaned on each other. Every insult, every silent hallway, every fake smile from teachers who did nothing at all built something inside them. Not bitterness, but power. They didn't let the pain crush them. Instead, they used it like fuel. They trained harder with their father. They studied harder. They stood taller. They didn't ask to be heroes, but they became role models anyway. What made them strong wasn't just what they'd been through, it was how they chose to respond. They didn't become cruel. They didn't turn cold. They became solid, like stone, quiet, calm, but unshakable. That strength made people look at them differently. Even those who once laughed now watched in silence. The halls that used to feel like traps now felt like victory walks. The pain didn't go away, but it changed shape. It became something they could use. Something that made them sharper, wiser, and ready for whatever came next. They weren't just surviving anymore, they were leading. Something was different at Rosewood Hills Academy. It wasn't loud or obvious, but Ayanna and Zaria felt it. The teachers, who once avoided eye contact or looked past them like they didn't matter, were now looking straight at them. When they called on them in class, it wasn't rushed or forced. It felt real. Respectful. The same teachers who once stayed silent when things got ugly were now paying attention. Some even smiled. Not fake smiles, real ones. Like they finally saw the truth about who the twins were. Even small things felt big. A nod in the hallway. A quiet good job after a test. It wasn't that the teachers had suddenly become perfect, but they had started to act like the twins mattered. Like their voices were finally being heard. It wasn't about special treatment. It was about fairness, about being seen and treated like everyone else. For the first time, Ayanna and Zaria weren't holding their breath in class. They could just be students. Focused, proud, and no longer invisible. That quiet shift meant everything. It was proof that the walls around them were finally cracking and the truth was starting to shine through. The halls of Rosewood Hills didn't feel the same anymore. Ayanna and Zaria noticed it first in the way people looked at them, not with judgment, but with something closer to respect. The whispers that used to follow them like shadows had faded. Instead, there were nods, quick smiles, and even a few quiet hellos. No one was pretending to be best friends, but the cold walls between them and the other students were starting to melt. At lunch, no one stared when the twins laughed or talked. They could be themselves without worrying about who was watching. Some classmates even asked them for help with assignments, or invited them to group projects. It wasn't a big deal, but it meant everything. The silence that used to feel heavy now felt calm, like people finally understood they didn't have to fear what was different. It wasn't about becoming popular. Ayanna and Zaria didn't care about that. What mattered was that people were seeing them for who they really were. Not rumors. Not lies. Just two strong girls who had stood their ground. And slowly, even quietly, that strength was changing how others behaved too. The courtyard used to feel like enemy ground. It was where the worst stares and whispers happened. But now, everything had changed. Ayana and Zaria walked across the open space with their heads high. No one looked at them with hate or laughed behind their backs. The air even felt lighter, like the place itself had taken a deep breath and let go of something heavy. They picked their usual spot under the big oak tree. It had always been there, strong and steady, but now it felt like their own. Sunlight poured through the branches and warmed their faces. They ate lunch, cracked jokes, and talked about everything from school to dreams about the future. For once, there was no need to stay quiet or watch their backs. Other students sat nearby, and while they didn't always speak, their silence wasn't cold anymore. It felt like respect. No one tried to move them or bother them. The courtyard, once full of fear, was now full of peace. Ayana and Zaria hadn't just survived this place, they had made it theirs. Step by step, moment by moment, they had claimed the space with quiet power. And now, they finally felt free. Life at the school slowly became normal again, but it wasn't the same kind of normal as before. It was better. Ayana and Zaria moved through their days with calm confidence. The hallway that once echoed with hate now felt quiet in a good way. It wasn't just the school that had changed, it was them too. They didn't forget what they'd been through, but they didn't let it weigh them down either. Instead, those memories gave them strength. Every step they took reminded them how far they had come. The school looked almost the same, but something deep inside it had shifted. The fear that once lived there was gone, replaced by a quiet respect. Teachers spoke to them kindly, and classmates acted differently, not fake, but real. No more fake smiles or forced hellos. Everything felt earned. The peace Ayana and Zaria found wasn't handed to them, they had to fight for it. And because of that, it meant something. They didn't win by shouting. They won by standing strong. That power stayed with them, a part of who they were now. And as they looked around, they knew this new peace wasn't just theirs, it was built to last. Something deep had shifted at the school, something you couldn't always see, but you could definitely feel. It wasn't just about Ayana and Zaria anymore. Their fight had started something bigger. The whole school began to feel different, like it had woken up and realized how wrong things used to be. The rules didn't change on paper, but the way people treated each other did. Teachers paid more attention. They stopped looking the other way when something unfair happened. Now, they stood up and made sure every student felt safe. Even the small things mattered, like how a teacher said your name, or whether someone saved you a seat at lunch. Ayana and Zaria noticed it all. They knew their courage had helped create this new feeling. They had forced the school to grow up a little. It had learned to be better, not just for them, but for every kid who walked through those doors. That feeling, that shift, it wasn't going away. It had settled into the walls, the classrooms, the lunch tables. The school had changed for real. And Ayana and Zaria? They were proud. Not just because they survived, but because they made a difference that would last. Even with all the changes at school, Ayana and Zaria never forgot where their strength came from. Their father's voice still lived in their minds, calm, strong, and always clear. Stand your ground, he had told them, again and again. At first, those words just felt like advice. But after everything they'd been through, they now understood just how powerful they really were. He wasn't just talking about fights or standing up to bullies. He meant standing up for what's right, even when it's hard. He taught them to stay calm when others were loud, to stay strong when others tried to make them feel small. His lessons were never just words, they were actions, lived out every day in how he treated others and how he protected his daughters. Now, when Ayana and Zaria walked the school halls, they carried those lessons like armor. They didn't need to shout to be heard. They didn't need to prove anything to anyone. They knew who they were, and that was enough. Their father's wisdom had shaped them. It gave them roots, but also wings. And even as they looked toward the future, they held tight to the lessons that helped them rise. Ayana and Zarya didn't just change things for themselves, they opened a new path for others too. Every step they took, every time they stood tall, they were making the school a better place for the students who would come after them. Kids who once felt invisible now felt seen. Those who were too scared to speak up started to believe they could. The twins never asked for thanks or attention. That wasn't their goal. They wanted fairness, respect, and a place where no one had to fight just to be treated like a human being. And slowly, they started to see that dream grow. New students began to walk the halls with more confidence. Teachers listened more. The fear that used to hang over the school like a cloud had started to lift. Ayana and Zarya had planted something strong, something that would keep growing long after they were gone. They were more than just two girls who stood up for themselves. They became a symbol of what courage and love can build. Their story wasn't just their own anymore. It belonged to every student who felt different, who felt alone, and it told them, "You are not. Stand tall. You belong here too." The afternoon sun poured across the green lawn of the school, stretching long shadows under the big oak tree. Ayana and Zarya sat close together, their lunches half finished, their laughter drifting gently in the warm air. It felt like the world had finally slowed down. No whispers behind their backs. No angry stares. Just peace. They didn't talk about the hard days, not because they had forgotten, but because they had grown stronger from them. Their smiles weren't fake or forced. They were real, full of the kind of happiness that comes after a storm. They had walked through the fire and come out shining on the other side. The school that once felt cold and harsh now felt different. Softer. Kinder. As they looked around, they saw kids talking easily, teachers smiling, and the courtyard alive with calm. This was the same place that had once tried to break them, but it couldn't. Ayana leaned her head on Zarya's shoulder. "We really made it," she said. And she was right. They had not only survived, they had changed everything. They had taken pain and turned it into something strong, something lasting. The wind moved gently through the trees, and for a moment, everything felt perfect. They didn't know what challenges would come next, but they weren't afraid. As long as they had each other, they knew they'd be okay. They had found peace, and more importantly, they had earned it. They had won. And they were just getting started.